Welcome back, everybody, for episode 2 of Tokyo Table Talk.
All right. Tokyo Table Talks, our weekly unscripted podcast where we talk about things like Dungeons and Dragons. So, today at the table we've got me, Vincent, who plays Atlas.
You have DM Mike, and...
I'm Dragor.
Let's get right into things today. Now, today's topic, we're going to be talking about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and what's good and bad about it. So, I think at the table, collectively, we've got a lot of years of experience playing tabletop role-playing games.
Definitely, yeah.
I mean, 5th edition is the relatively new game.
It's the new hotness. I would say to start us off, though, I would definitely say mostly good about 5th edition. So... To give some background, though, I started with 2nd edition, but my experience comes from 3.5.
Well, and everyone really, I think anyone who's played Dungeons & Dragons in the last decade pretty much comes from 3.5 Pathfinder, and has moved into 5.
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah, I played some old stuff, some Dark Sun-like style character, I remember, because I think one of our party members was a Thrycreen. Whatever was.
Yeah, the bugs.
His go-to move was to bite the head off of his enemies. I don't remember which editions I'd played. I just remember what the player handbook looked like, and I'm like, that's the one I had, and that kind of stuff. And right away, when it comes to things I like that they... If there's one of those things, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I feel like they did that, or messed it up with the combat system structure in general going into 4th, when you had your at will, once per encounter, once per day. Now, some of those abilities might be nice, but it's just like, so I'm going to attack this way, or I'm going to attack this way, and then, I'll use my encounter one now. It might simplify it for some people, but I liked the complete customizing whatever of the general combat wins. Either I attack, or I do this kind of action, and if it's something that's not just a general attack, then you're like, okay, you want to try this? Okay, well, roll for it. Let's see if you do it. And then you get things more open between you and the DM that way.
Yeah, no, 4th edition was kind of a departure from the role-playing aspect of the tabletop role-playing game, which is not to say that it's bad. I know several people who really like 4th edition, and we're not going to disparage any of the systems here, except for that we know everybody at the table knows that 4th edition was objectively the worst one. But 4th edition kind of took a big step away from the role-playing aspect and made it more about the combat, the abilities to use during fights. And if that's the kind of game that you're looking for, then 4th edition was great. It was not the game that a lot of people were looking for, though.
That's the thing about Dungeons & Dragons, is that it's not that you must play 5th edition now. You can always play the edition you like most. But let's start it from the beginning, though. Character creation in 5th edition.
Character creation. I mean, I don't really think that there's a lot different in the beginning bits of character creation between 5th and 3rd.
Right.
You roll your stats, or you do point buy, you do standard array.
Yeah.
And those have all been pretty, cut and standard for the past several editions. But I personally really miss putting points into skills.
Yeah, I feel that's the elephant in the room when you're comparing 3, 5 to 5.
Intelligence, correct? On the system?
Yeah, it was based on your intelligence.
Each level,
and
you get a certain number of points you can put in.
Right.
So you could have some real good specialization there.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, and the fact that now that there's only 15 skills in the game, everything sort of gets put under that umbrella. Stealth. Stealth now counts for picking pockets. I guess that's sleight of hand, isn't it?
But hiding, sneaking, and just...
move silently and hide were the two big stealth skills
that they've put into stealth. And it's you could be pretty silent, but also be huge and impossible to hide if you were a giant snake or something. Yeah. But now giant snakes can hide too, I guess. I don't know. That was the thing that I really liked in the character creation was I can actually take profession as a skill.
Yes.
Yes, it was a story thing that kind of objectively burned points that you could have been putting into things that were more useful towards the game mechanics. but it loses a little bit of like, well, you know, my character was a blacksmith. Mm-hmm. He has the skill to prove it.
Right.
In 5th edition, if your character was a blacksmith, okay, he was a blacksmith.
Right.
What skills did that give him?
Mm-hmm. I mean, they do have the backgrounds for that. You can take the artisan background, you can say, oh, I was from a blacksmithing family, and you do get skills and abilities to show for that, but it doesn't feel like it's yours, like it does in 3.5.
At most, you might be able to say, oh, would I notice this kind of thing, or would I know this knowledge? And be like, well, you were a sailor, so do it with advantage, or something like that.
Yeah,
and that's good, but it's not what it would have been in previous editions.
Right.
Where blacksmithing would have been like, oh, you have a bit more when it comes to anything that you roll in regards to armor or weapons. If you try to do something, you know, you're going to be just naturally more handy with it, so you'll have extra point or two in that.
Right.
Whereas this is a bit more role-playing focus when it comes to your background.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, I feel like that's a good thing. Like, anything that puts the onus on the playing of the role more than, like, the rolling of the die is good.
Yeah.
But I feel like we're missing a trick still.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
For me, one of the biggest things I've noticed is that part of character creation, especially when you go from any class or if you go into and then you go into fighter, is feats. Feats I felt like was a lot more involved in previous editions. For example, if I decide to go with a fighter, the main thing about being a fighter is like, oh, I'm going to do 2-weapon fighting, and I'm going to do like finesse or whatever. So that I'd be extra awesome
get
with
great
this.
cleave.
Oh, can you imagine Dragor with cleave?
Oh my god!
Like, he already does enough. Now, given, I would totally be going for that if I could, but still, there's the things are spread out a bit more so that the feats only come in when you get your stat point or feat. And in the previous editions, there was a lot more feats, so you would have more focus, more specialization in your character and how they work. So you wouldn't just be a rogue with some benefits in these things. You really would be specific, like, oh, I'm just awesome when it comes to anything traps or unlocking, and that's my thing. And
Back
I'm
when
do
we had
good.
dungeoneering as a skill.
Right.
Like, it's guaranteed that you're going to be good at that. Whereas here, it's like, oh, this is kind of your focus, so you might have an extra point or two in that. As opposed to, in previous, if you really invested in it, it's like, oh, this one thing I'm going to do awesome at. I'm probably going to suck at some other stuff, but this is my thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of how humans are in the real world. Like, I did circus for a while, so I can do tumbling, I can do tightrope and junk, but my main focus in it is object manipulation. I'm a significantly better staff spinner than I am a unicyclist. But if I were taking this in 5th edition, I would take the circus performer background or whatever, and then I'd be good at circus.
Yeah.
And I feel like that, like, you lose a lot of the specificity that your character could have.
Right.
So you really have to, like, play it up in story instead of being able to just be like, well, you can look at my character sheet and see what kind of character he is. In this case, you look at the character sheet and the 8-page backstory that you've written up and the notes on the campaign, and then you might be able to see what kind of character it is.
Yeah. And that's ultimately what it does come down to, is that rule zero of between you, the DM, and the other players at the table. The rules are just a guideline. And there is always that. However, for new players coming into 5th, it is easier to roll up a character, but when we look at the amount of skills at the table and we call for checks on, for example, like, let's make a survival check, and 3 of the 6 players are proficient, that wouldn't happen in 3.5.
No.
It would be very, very specifically focused. And now, given your rogue or certain other, warrior classes might have certain aspects of, when it comes to reflexes or being able to respond to things, it was definitely more focused on that back then. Like, you might have a passive, skill check thing that would happen that if you weren't ready for it.
Right.
Here, you have to, like, prepare for everything in order to be able to roll for it or do well. Like, yeah, so things are a little more general here, but it is a good starting point.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, and that's another thing about the whole having skills and stuff is, like, if I take the Bard class, I am instantly proficient in some skills.
Yes.
Where in 3.5 in the previous editions, if I took Bard class, I had the opportunity to be proficient in specific skills. that you get class skills, cross-class skills, where it would take you, it takes you more effort to be good at it because it's not something that you normally do, and I think that's really cool. But in 5th edition, gaining new skills is next to impossible. Yeah. You have to take a feat to do it, or you have to have a GM that's like, you've practiced enough at this thing, now you have proficiency in it.
Or take level dips.
Yeah. Level dips, man.
The skill things, back in the previous editions, if I did something like, if I did my halfling rogue, everything I did was based on every other part. So the stats I rolled were completely focused around me being a rogue. Mm-hmm. The skills that I choose specifically focus around being a rogue to get the maximum benefit. Mm-hmm. I think, I do that in 5th edition, but I think it's not as involved because there are less skills and there ends up being less points I'm able to put in. And so it feels just a bit different that when I want to be like a halfling rogue that really is into, if my dex is high enough, then chances are I won't be getting hit that much, and I'll be focused highly on tumbling or athletics or something based on my character. There's a lot more different kinds of skills as opposed to just do athletics. Mm-hmm. You have your tumbling, you have your balance,
jump, swim, balance.
So you really can be focused on what you're trying to do, as opposed to, I want to try this. I guess that follows under athletics. Whereas here it's I'm going to do this thing. Okay, that's definitely a balance and tumble. Yes. Give me that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess it just comes down to, you lose the nuance in a character here.
You do.
Because, that's again, in the previous editions, you could put, 2 points into a skill to show that you've got passing knowledge of it.
Yeah.
But here, if you have proficiency with it, you are an expert.
Yes.
And I feel like that's a propensity towards the idea that people who are playing a tabletop role-playing game are heroes, as opposed to adventurers. Because if you're a hero, you have to be a paragon of your thing. You have to be great at all the things your character does, because otherwise it's not this epic sort of story. Barbarians, for instance. They are great at smashing junk. And a 5th edition barbarian is the best at smashing junk.
Yeah.
But if you built a 3rd edition barbarian and had him fight a 5th edition barbarian, the 5th edition barbarian would probably, by and large, beat the hell out of the 3rd edition one.
Oh, mainly because they're taking half damage on all the hits.
Well, we're going to talk about that in a minute, I think.
But so you got your skill proficiencies, you've chosen your class. What do you feel about not being your actual class until, in most cases, 3rd level, sometimes 2nd level?
And this is in 5th edition?
5th edition.
Because it takes a while for certain things to kick in, whereas in the 3.5 or others, you definitely are more focused, and you have a history of being this thing, even at 1 or 2 levels.
Yes.
Whereas here, it's I'm not really feeling very barbarianish until I get this specific skill, or this benefit, or my rage.
Yep.
I'm not
you hit 3, you get to choose your path or your subclass, and then you are actually your thing.
Yeah, well, and that goes with the having removed prestige classes.
Yes.
Which is something that I dearly miss, because Bard is kind of garbage at 7 and 8. But, the idea that you start in 5th edition, you start as a guy with slightly more skills. And then once you get a couple levels in it, you suddenly become that thing, the better version of that thing, I think is... it goes with story of the hero, where the hero has, responsibility thrust upon them and doesn't want to do it, but then, there's that entire cycle that they talk about in fiction all the time. And I feel like that's kind of more what we're looking at here, where in 3rd edition, if you have a level in a class, you're already better than most people.
Yeah.
Right.
Where in this one, if I'm a level 1 fighter, I could probably take someone who's in the town guard, who is the level 1 NPC class warrior or something like that.
Right.
But once I get to level 3, that's when I really become heroic.
Yes.
Because you go from 0 to hero real fast in 5th edition.
You do. Yeah. You do.
And I like you mentioned prestige class, and I like that in the other ones, because my example being was I would play the rogue, and I would choose, am I going assassin? Am I going swashbuckler? Am I going what? And each one has its own focus. Oh, swashbuckler means you get proficient in these skills. Oh, thank you. And you get this thing. I'm like, that's awesome. And maybe you'll get a little extra benefit in like charisma or extra with these kind of roles, but not just charisma, but persuade. And then or assassin is like, you get this benefit with these weapons, or
you can
backstab
do poison
gets a little
stuff.
extra boost, and like it just gives you something really to look forward to. Not that I don't look forward to the stuff in my barbarian in 5th, but I kind of ahead of time, because I've taken a level in fighter, because early on I'm like, okay, once I get to here, I feel like I'm going to be satisfied with what I can get as a barbarian, and I will need to branch out.
Right.
Whereas in the previous editions, that might come up depending on your class, but chances are if I chose my halfling rogue or my barbarian, I'm like settled to be there for a while.
Well, and I mean, like, that's the thing, like, when I roll a character in 3.5, for instance, I roll up an elf wizard or something, and I immediately am already thinking, okay, at level 6, since I will have these things, I have the possibility to go into Lore Master. Because then I gain all this extra stuff. Or I could go into Shadow Dancer, because I can, and you don't get that in 5th edition. In 5th edition, you kind of know where you're going from the beginning, and you don't really have a lot of choice in that matter. Like, once you hit level 3, you can choose, am I going the path of light or the path of dark, or whatever it is. And then you're set in that path, unless you want to multi-class. And 5th edition multi-classing.
Yeah, because of that, because you do not get your abilities until 3. Some classes, it is 2. But if you want to multi-class, you usually have to dip 2 or 3 levels before it's even worth your time.
Right.
And if you were level 6 and you're looking at level 7, not quite sure you want to continue down your base class, you are not really going to be useful until you're 9 or 10. And by then, your other party members who went full fighter, who went full wizard, it's night and day between the two of you.
Oh yeah, you lose a lot of your efficacy as a character if you multi-class. Because you're taking you're essentially taking a huge dip in experience points for very little payoff right off the bat. Unless you go into fighter. If you dip 1 fighter, you suddenly get a bunch of good stuff. If you dip 1 barbarian, you suddenly get a bunch of good stuff.
Yeah.
Those are the 2 things that you should really look at. A lot of people I've been seeing have been saying, like, the best build is 1 fighter, 1 barbarian, 2 warlock, and then who gives a shit.
Right, pretty much.
And, like, if you can immediately have that meta, it's like, what is this, Magic the Gathering? Now everyone knows what the best deck is, and everyone builds that?
No, but see, in Magic the Gathering, I see people doing that, and I just say, screw it, I'm making an unglued deck. Just for the hell of it. You make your dumb gimmick decks or whatever. And, like, that's kind of how I play tabletops as well, because I kind of don't care about being the most powerful or whatever. But a lot of people can see what 5th edition has done and is like, well, okay, obviously we're not taking Ranger because it's garbage.
Yeah, Ranger's a bit rough.
So nobody plays Rangers.
Yeah.
And everyone who wants to be really powerful has to take Warlock 2 and Barbarian 1. Because Barbarian 1, you immediately get that half damage when you rage, which is ridiculous. By the way, let's talk about that for a second.
A good number of moments, I've lost count over what's going on just because I automatically just go into a rage.
Right.
And thus, I, on average, except for those fun magic moments, thank you, Corey, I will take some damage. And so, yeah.
Well, you're effectively doubling your hit points at the beginning of every fight.
Right.
How ridiculous is that?
And being on a D12 hit die, it's going to get pretty high very quickly.
Yep.
You're going to be in your maybe level 8, level 9. You're already pushing almost 100 HP. Now that's in 200. And now it puts some stress on me as the DM where how can I challenge Dragor? Because now I have to I can't do one big bad monster. That's off the table now. Because it's going to get tanked and it's just going to be whittled down by the party very quickly.
Oh yeah.
So I have to either put in multiple monsters. I have to put in 1 meat shield to keep Dragor busy, and then other monsters to challenge the party.
Or, the thing is that there's a base... the number of actions is still limited, even for Dragor, who still has a decent amount of actions with his rage. You throw in a large enough number of kobolds,
right,
and it could still be
it's still tough
because there are only so many actions.
Action economy,
which is good.
Yeah,
and then you can still kind of manage it. How much does the party get hurt? As opposed to, even though Dragger Power won't get hurt, how much will the party get hurt? And if the party's getting hurt, then you have to manage and organize, and that can go a certain way. But because one big monster, if it's a challenge for Dragor, it's going to rip apart the others.
Yes. Oh, it's going to stomp us.
Exactly.
Like, Atlas the Bard is the same level as Corey the Sorcerer, and Corey has more hit points than Atlas.
Yeah.
Atlas would get stomped on by anything big enough to make Dragor pause for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, it must be really difficult on you, Mike, to just be like, okay, well, we have an encounter today, so it's got to be like, we're going to put in a Gorgon. Mm-hmm. And now that we've got the Gorgon, which is the main thing, how do we deal with Dragor?
Pretty much.
Or how do we deal with Corey, who's got, like, stupid amounts of burst damage?
Yeah, and that's the thing is, when you are balancing the combat encounters and it's deadly, it should be deadly for one party member.
In this edition.
Because deadly is not a TPK. Deadly is one of your party members going to drop. Mm-hmm. And we've been seeing that pretty consistently.
Yeah, it's mostly Atlas.
It's mostly Atlas. Atlas and Corey. I think Corey is up there for KOs.
Corey might be tying Atlas, yeah.
And that gives you guys that oh shit moment, but never to where this fight may go badly. The Beholder fight was getting there, but because it used mechanics that I don't completely agree with, is round 1, Dragor is slow, stoned, and sleeped. Mm-hmm. And now, the player, Matt, you are out of the fight. Mm-hmm. And that is not a strong mechanic, I feel.
No, it's like in game design. Like, when I was working on Ghostbusters, the board game too, Ghostbusters 1 had a mechanic where you got slimed, and if you got slimed, it reduced the amount of actions you could do during your turn, and if you were 2 slimes, you skipped your turn.
Yeah.
And that was boring. It was
It's not fun.
So we had to switch that to be like, okay, well, it reduces your movement, or it reduces your line of sight, or something like that, because that made it so that you weren't eliminated from the game.
Yeah.
Player elimination is an outdated mechanic now.
Yeah, it is.
Unless there's like once you are eliminated, you do a different thing.
Right.
But at that point, it's not really player elimination anymore.
Exactly,
And the fighting, like the systems for this one, in order to take care of a big dude like Dragor, you remove him from the fight.
Exactly.
And that's bad.
It's boring, yeah.
It's not good for the players, it's not good for the GM. That whole thing makes things very difficult.
It does. It really does. And if you're not going to use that player elimination, if we're not going to use the status elements to remove the Barbarian, 5th edition, they don't give us any options, anything new for that.
Mm-hmm. The only really real option that you've got is to split the party up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And at that point, you put Dragor in a room with like 6 dudes, and then everyone else gets to fight whatever the main thing is. Or like you take Corey and put him in an anti-magic circle, and now suddenly he's got to use his crossbow or something.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, it's not good. So 5th edition's class abilities, like especially the Barbarian's half damage thing, really make it difficult to balance fights.
It does.
But like also the scaling with level spells.
Yes. And that's why Eldritch Blast comes up. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The only reason that people play Warlock is to get Eldritch Blast.
Right.
Because it's a cantrip that's damage like scales with your level.
Right, not your caster level, not your warlock level.
Your character level. So you can be a warlock 2, rogue 15, and that counts as caster level 19 or whatever. And, well, 17, because I can math. But that's ridiculous. You don't gain more power as a spellcaster by learning how to tumble and pick locks.
In 5th edition, you do.
Okay, fine. If that's what you say. Sure.
But that's rules as written, and it does not make a whole bunch of sense.
I mean, I like the idea. I like the idea that you can get a spell, and as you grow, it grows with you. But I feel like you have to invest something in it at that point.
Yeah.
In order to get that spell to be stronger, you have to do something to make it stronger. You can't learn a spell when you're 6 and then never use it for 15 years. And then the first time you use it when you're 31, it's like, oh, I'm level 25 now, by the way. You remember that one spell that you taught me when I was 6? Blam! Blew a hole in a dragon.
Yeah.
It's an awkward, weird balance on that one, because on the one hand, I don't really like it. On the other hand, I'm thinking that I might dip 2 into Warlock so that Atlas can do it. You gotta figure out what makes your character useful to your party. And that's another thing that I think 5th edition has really taken from us, is having the ability to be useful to your party at any level.
Yeah.
Because, like, you can take skills. Anyone who had a disabled device was invaluable to the party.
Right.
So bards and rogues were great for that.
Right.
Anyone who had knowledge arcana was invaluable to the party. So wizards, sorcerers, and bards. Really, if you had a bard in the party, you're probably okay for a lot of the knowledge stuff. But then, if you had a bard in the party in 3rd edition, this is actually kind of something that I do like a little bit more about 5th edition. Bards in 3rd edition were paper. They were stay out of the fight if you want to make sure that you don't kill your character.
Yeah.
You stayed out, you threw, like, heals and buffs on people, and you did nothing else. Now, granted, that's kind of what I'm doing this edition as well, but at least I've got, like, I can kind of hold my own in, like, a one-on-one duel with somebody.
Yeah.
You kind of couldn't do that back in 5th unless you were really, like, feat scumming. Making sure that your bard was taking feats that a bard would not take.
Well, that's the thing, is when we talk about 3.5, are we talking about vanilla 3.5? Because bards, they do have a pretty extensive spell list if we start getting into some of the other source books.
That's true. Oh, and there's the other thing.
That's the other thing.
3. So 5th edition has got, like, what, 2 extra source books or something like that
and
right
not
now?
even, because if you look at, like, Sword Coast Adventures, it is just lore. There's very few new mechanics. We're actually only getting our first new source book this November with the Guide to Everything.
Yes, which is going to be fantastic.
That sounds great.
Oh, yeah.
But until then, we've had a bit of Unearthed Arcana, which half of it is useless, half of it is broken. And it's really been tough. It's been pretty dry. We have new monsters. We have adventures. So many adventures.
Wazoo, yeah.
But actual new mechanics, new rules, new classes, abilities, and spells, it's been slim pickings.
Yeah.
Oh, there's Elemental Evil. We have that, which is... touches on a few different races. There's a handful of spells in there, but it's more different flavors of the same. And I think that's part of 5th edition, that it is... If you look at the spells in 5th edition, you can put them under only just a few categories of a status effect, of damage, where I felt 3.5 had a lot more spells that do things.
Yeah,
if that makes any sense.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Well, because in 5th you've got utility, damage, healing, and, like, support.
The support is pretty much gone in this, thanks to concentration.
Yeah, especially for concentration. Like, haste, for instance. What BS is haste, such that you, who are the spellcaster, cast haste on someone else, and then you can't cast another spell as long as you want them to continue having haste.
Right.
That's rough.
Yeah.
That's rough,
So you're going to take our Druid Vera, for example. Let's take her usefulness down to 0% because she needs to maintain concentration. And then we're going to make Dragor maybe 25 to 50% better.
Yeah.
It just doesn't... Concentration, in many times, it really doesn't add up.
The way that I would fix the concentration mechanic is that you just switch it back to 3.5's thing. If it's a buff, then it's a buff. You don't have to concentrate on it being a buff.
Right, because certain aspects would be like, it's an aura thing. If you're a bard and you're singing a song, then yes, you can really kind of only do that. Maybe you can throw in an extra something and you, like, roll to make sure you're fine.
Sure.
Or you skip a step or something. Cool. But yeah, this thing of, like, I wouldn't completely say, oh, if you cast another thing... It just stops your concentration. Well, it depends. What are you casting? Maybe you can roll to see... Because maybe if you're really good at something, you could be playing your lute, and then maybe you throw a little thing that way, and then you hit the string, like, in mid-chord, you threw a thing that way, and then it kept going.
Well, like, especially if it's a spell that only has verbal components. If I'm doing, like, Counter Charm or something, and I want to throw in the words that cast the spell into my song, I should be able to do that. So that I suppose that's actually how I might do it. I would probably, and it'd be a lot of work, but I'd go through the spell list and make a mark for which spells don't interrupt concentration.
Right.
I'm just saying, man, like bless, haste, slow, that sort of stuff should not need concentration. Mm-hmm. It should not need it.
I could see something where, let's take haste, because that seems to be the most useful spell that we've seen in the party. Mm-hmm. An idea where you have haste on Dragor, so now Veda needs to maintain concentration, and that will last maybe 2 rounds.
Yeah.
And that Veda can drop concentration. And then after those 2 rounds, the spell will fade, unless Veda spends a round on concentration, awarding another 2 rounds of the spell. Mm-hmm. Something where it doesn't completely remove Veda from the game. She can cast haste, so now she knows I have 2 rounds where I can actually do actions. Mm-hmm. And then on that 3rd one, I need to reconcentrate.
Yeah, you something throw a little bit more mana into it.
But something that does not completely remove the caster from the action economy.
Yeah. Oh, it's so...
Really, because that's exactly what it's doing, is it's removing Veda's action to give Dragor an extra attack. Not even an action, an extra attack.
Yeah. And I mean, like, concentration, you can still make an attack or whatever while you're making a concentration.
Right.
It's just the second that you take damage, you might lose it.
Right.
If you want to cast a different spell, like a spellcaster would, you lose it.
Like, if something is concentration, then any other action should be a DC-based thing. Like, you want to attack? Depends on what you're doing. If you want to cast another spell, well, depends on the spell, and it has a DC attached to it. It makes sense that it would have that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, like, we could make a character ability, like a feat that you can take that's like, iron concentration.
Right.
Where you can just be like, you're better at concentrating on spells.
Yeah.
You get to, like, the spells that would normally break concentration now only break concentration if you fail a DC or something like that.
Right.
That would be super cool.
Definitely something to play around with, I would think.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think, like, the answer to a lot of the how would you fix this problem is homebrew.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I have never played in a game, and I've never DM'd a game where we were 100% rules as written.
Oh, right.
I don't think that's even a thing. Maybe Adventures League?
Well, yeah, for certain aspects, I always felt that the book should be a starting point.
Exactly.
A guideline to go from.
Of course.
And the great part about being the host of it is that you get to use that starting point as a reference for the mechanics of combat and how your character functions, but you get to start there and go from there and just do your own thing with it.
Mm-hmm. I feel you.
Right.
Man, combat mechanics, though, right? Like, the mechanics of combat are a little bit different in 5th edition as well, but I feel like one of the main problems that we've had in several of the editions that has not really been fixed by an official source is initiative.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about that right now. We've got an internal sponsor that we're going to talk about. Today we're going to talk about Axe Tax. Does your combat seem a little too boring for you? A little too round-robin? A little too predictable? Well, have we got the thing for you? Axe Tax is a new active combat system that utilizes technology to make your combats more unpredictable, real-time based, and more fun in general. If you want to take a look at it, it's free right now at www.axe.tax. With this new combat system, your table's combats will be spiced up. Take things to the next level. Pay the Axe Tax. Thank you, sponsor. No problem, bro. We're gonna talk about initiative.
Mm-hmm.
This is a thing that, like, a lot of different combat systems from different games have tried to fix over the past.
So, should we do a quick refresher on previous editions, how it was done, and 5th, just in case anyone needs a touch-up, including me?
Well, 3, 5, and 4 was just the standard. Okay, it's Dragor's turn, do your thing, and then
you move down to the bottom of the order.
Next.
Right.
2nd edition, they did spell casting a bit differently.
Oh,
where if you cast a spell, the casting time would drop you in the initiative.
Like, it wouldn't happen for a while. It's kind of like the Final Fantasy thing. Like, I cast it, and it takes, like, 3 weight to cast this spell. It costs 5 weight to cast that spell.
Right.
Yeah.
And, like, that was a cool idea, but it was a lot to keep track of, which I think is why they got rid of it.
Yes.
Because they didn't have technology to do it for us then.
Right.
We've got that now.
stuff like that would be cool because it's automated. It gives the feel of something like if I'm playing Final Fantasy 3 or whatever, and someone to cast Cure, and I have other people fighting. I'm like, hurry up, Cure! Like this person goes, no, come on, Cure!
Yeah, no, you're casting the spell.
It figures out for you. It's going to do it for you. But there's kind of anticipation of is it going to happen now?
Yeah,
happen
now? Are we going to have it happen in time before they get
it makes
murdered or whatever?
It feel like the way combat would feel,
right?
And that's hard when you have no automatic tracking.
Yes.
Yeah, but like so in other games, they've done different things with it to try to break up the round robin effect. Like in Shadowrun, they've got initiative passes, where if you're a pretty fast character, so like everyone rolls their initiative and they find their order or whatever, and then everyone goes through that order once. Then everyone who has more than one initiative pass goes again. Then everyone who's got more than 2 goes again, and 3 goes again. So you'll get... Like, I had a Street Samurai character who had 4 initiative passes. It was ridiculous. He would just murder everyone in combat. So, like, it would be like, okay, he goes, then everyone goes. Then he goes again. Nobody else has another initiative pass. So he goes again after that. And then again. So he gets 1 turn, and then everyone goes. Then he gets 4 turns, and then everyone goes.
No, it would not go like that in any reality
No.
kind of setting.
No,
it would be evenly broken up amongst the...
Right.
The amount of time it takes one person to do an act, he gets 2 or 3 acts.
Right.
Or whatever.
Right,
That's
right.
how it would happen.
Yeah. So, like, it was a fun idea, but I think it was not implemented very well there. The game Donjon has the rules where you just do it however you feel. When combat starts, people say what they want to do, and the GM gets to decide when it happens.
Yeah.
So that one is kind of the opposite end of it, where it's like, there's really not a rule for it. You guys got to do it.
Got to kind of make it happen.
Yeah. So I feel like a good way to fix that would be to start using technology.
Right.
Like Axe Tax. So Axe Tax has a lot of, like, internal calculations that it does to make sure that everything runs out smoothly. Mike, do you want to talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, so what we did was we all use phones when we sit down at our table, and we roll initiative like normal, and we join the website. And what happens is, as you select actions, we assign a tick count to certain actions. An action being a 6, a bonus action being a 3, movement being normally 1 per square, but in Dragor's case, he's actually able to move more because of his barbarian speed. And what this does is it breaks up combat to where Atlas will move 2 squares, and then Dragor will swing his axe, and then Atlas will be able to move and do an action before Dragor gets to go again, since
Dragor's thing took longer than what Atlas did.
Right. And now you add in more monsters, you add in more players, and now suddenly you don't know who is going to come up next. It depends on what is happening in the moment.
And so the order, it seemed like it's completely based on the 2 main factors of the initiative that you rolled and the action that you take. Are those the 2 main factors into the how often you go and when you go in the Axe Tax?
In Axe Tax, you actually get just as many actions as you would in the normal round robin. But when they happen is completely up to what you do.
Okay. And that's something I'm curious about because when you mentioned the Shadowrun and about having the guy would have multiple actions, and it makes me wonder about certain factors like a character who might not normally do as much damage like Atlas or a rogue character.
Right.
They might have the initiative so they would go first. But in reality, they might go more often in order to match someone else. And so I'm wondering if it's ever something that dexterity would be a factor contributed into order. How often they would go is not just going first, but how often they go on default.
Right.
And we've talked about that kind of stuff as well, like having there be mechanics that we can homebrew and like release for Axe Tax that make it such that like, you know, your standard actions take 1 less tick to do or something like that.
Right.
And like it would actually be really cool to have that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because then you can just be like, all right, well, combat looks like it's going to start. I'm going to put on my, like, ring of adrenaline or something. And the ring of adrenaline, while you have it turned on, makes it such that your standard actions and bonus actions cost 1 less tick each or something like that. It's very subtle, but it's definitely enough. It's enough to notice, it's enough to make use of. And I feel like that would be something that's really cool to look into there.
Well, breaking that down, it would be, let's say, a standard action or an action is 6 ticks.
Yeah.
If that ring reduced that by 1, so that means for every 6 actions, you got 1 for free. And I don't think that is that hard to balance.
Yeah, it's not game-breaking.
It's not game-breaking. It's a nice bonus. But to pull it back, we didn't really see any major upsets in how they handle combat in 5th edition. You're still taking an action. They did break down the action economy into much simpler terms. Action, bonus action, movement. And then reaction as well.
And reaction, yeah.
Whereas in 3.5, it was standard action, swift action, free action.
Well, swift action was a 4th edition thing.
Was it? Okay.
In 3rd edition, it was you had a full round action,
right?
A standard action,
right.
A bonus action, and a free action.
Right, and movement.
Yeah, and movement. And you could do all of... Well, you couldn't do the full round action. The full round action was like casting a big spell or something like that. But you could do like 6 spaces of movement... a standard action, a bonus action, and a free action, all in in 1 6-second span.
And your standard action in later levels, that could be 6 attacks as a monk.
Yeah. You do your flurry of blows, and you're suddenly doubling the amount of attacks that you do.
Yeah.
Oh, it was
And then you're
intense.
hasted, so you're rolling 8d20 to see how many times you hit, and then it got pretty insane. It was super dice heavy. It was very hard to understand how much you can actually do, and throwing that to new players, I think that was one of the big turnoffs with Tabletop. And now with 4th, they fixed a lot of that, and then with 5th, it is very easy to understand what you can do on your turn.
Well, in 4th edition, they quote-unquote fixed it by giving you a hand of cards that said, like, here is the card that you can use during your turn that allows you to attack. It flips back over at the beginning of your turn. And it made it like a bad mobile game almost.
Yeah, that's what they were going for. They wanted the WoW audience. That was very apparent with the whole striker, and it was pretty much the triad, the tank, DPS, and healing.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, definitely, but not what the core audience wanted.
It brought in the new kids, but it didn't keep them.
Right. Yeah. Right.
5th edition, I feel like, is actually really keeping its audience.
Absolutely.
Like, it's a fantastic way to get into the game, and it's great for, like, keeping the audience retention, keeping people coming back to the table. Like, if you jumped into something as rules heavy as Shadowrun without having played any other games before, of course it's going to be a turnoff. If you jump into, like, a level 14 character in 3.5 or whatever, there's a lot of stuff that you can do. A lot of
stuff. That's very hard.
If you play 3.5 and you start anything past 1 or 2, you're going to be there for a while making your character.
Right.
I have this, I have that. Okay, what in this combination? Yeah.
And I suppose that is, like, one of the taking it back a little bit. If you are rolling a high-level character in 5th edition, it takes, like, a fraction of the time.
Yeah.
Because, like, all you really have to choose there are feats.
You're right. You choose how many points do I want to put in, or any of it's going to be feats instead. And then, like, roll for my hit points for each level, and there you go.
Yeah. But I don't know. Like, the idea of the different versions having just slightly different, like, ways to do combat. Like, they've been trying to fix it for a long time. They're getting close. I feel like if something like Axe Tax were available to everybody, which it is, by the way, it would make the combat at a table significantly more fun for people. Especially because, like, you'll get a lot of... if you have, say, more than 4 people in a party, like a lot of groups do, because you have one person who will GM and 14 people who want to play the game.
Right.
So, if you have a lot like that, it'll be your turn, and then you don't do anything for 20 minutes.
Right.
So it's your turn, and then you play on your phone, and you play, Farmville or whatever you're doing. And then your turn comes back up again half an hour later, the whole board is changed, you haven't been paying attention to it. With Axe Tax, you gotta really pay attention to it. You gotta make sure that you're watching what's happening, because your turn might be coming up way sooner than you think. And I think that's another good thing. Because, like, a lot of people are, like, worried, if people are using technology at my table, it will distract them.
Yeah, it's actually been the opposite with us.
Oh, yeah. In our case, like, with the phones out, like, we look down to see who's next when we're coming up and how we can teamwork with other people, and then eyes go back on the board, because we don't know when the monsters are coming.
Right.
Because if the monsters come in the middle of our teamwork shit,
you gotta
then
completely
everything
rethink everything.
Yeah.
That happens every combat with us.
Oh, it happens all the time. Oh, it happens all the time.
You'll be sitting there thinking, okay, I go in 2 turns, or 2 people, I'm second on the list. Okay, what am I going to do? And all of a sudden, a monster goes and takes a bite out of someone. Oh, crap, no, I need to change this up. I need to do something else. And,
and that's really, that's how a normal fight would go, too. Like, you're thinking, okay, he's going to take a step over here, so I'm going to sweep at his leg, but then he doesn't, and you go, okay, change of plans. So, I don't know, I think that's a really clever way to fix out some of the issues that we've seen with combat and initiative and people getting bored at the table.
So, Vincent,
yes,
favorite thing and worst thing about 5th edition?
My favorite thing about 5th edition is probably the advantage-disadvantage system. I like the idea that instead of doing a bunch of extra math and being like, okay, you're in low light, so you get -2, but you've got your spectacles of dark vision, so you get +2, so that cancels that out, and then you've got to do all these calculations.
It's the second moon after you drank at a well, so that's a -2.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead, you just go, okay, you've got advantage on this one, and you roll 2 dice and take the better one. I like that. My least favorite thing is the levels where nothing happens with characters.
Dead levels.
Because that happens with every class.
It does. Although I think with the other editions, they might not have had a feat or a skill, but you might have had something. Like, I think some of them, those mechanics were figured in. Like, okay, this level they didn't get a feat or a stat or whatever, but maybe they get, like, maybe they happen to get +1 to their attack on this level as a filler.
Well, they get a lot of class features in 3 that we don't get in 5. There were a lot more things that, like, you get things as you progress much more quickly in 3 than you do in 5.
Yeah.
But yes, for instance, at Bard 7 or Bard 8 or whatever, you don't get anything. You don't get anything at Bard 7 and you don't get anything at Bard 8. At 8, every character gets their ability to take, like, extra to their stats or a feat or something like that. But that's an every character thing. It's not special to you. You have 2 dead levels where you get no bard stuff.
Right.
Rogues get it. Fighters get it. Fighters don't get it as often.
Rangers get it every level.
Rangers is every level, yeah. So I feel like the idea of the dead levels, at the very least they could have put in, like, a class feature into those things. Because, okay, you get access to 4th level spells. The 4th level spell list for bards is garbage. Or, you get +1d6 to your sneak attack damage.
Right.
Okay, but I've already got, like, a magic weapon that gives me +2d6 to it already.
Right.
Something like that. So I feel like getting more things for your character would be better. Dragor, what about you?
For the things I like, there are things that I like, but as far as a favorite, I'm not sure. I like what my character can do, and I like that he's very good at what he does. And so I definitely like feeling like I play a part in what happens. And it's okay, depending on your player personality, it can be difficult, but I'm okay with having there be moments that there are things I'm not good at. And it's like, just like there are times like, oh, roll perception or roll whatever. And I'm like, oh, this is not my moment. And something will happen.
But then you roll a 17 anyway.
Something
because
might happen like that. And it'll just be like, whoa. And so I like that I am good at what I do. However, I think it kind of ties in with my least favorite. And I've kind of touched on this earlier, is that with the previous editions, 3.5 and whatnot, for me, and for a lot of things, time invested creates value. And so when I spend more time in 3.5 choosing skills, feats, and details of my character, I feel more invested and I feel more focused and special about what my character can do. I'm more familiar with what my character can do because I spent that time. And so, yes, there's a bit more of a process involved, but I feel that much happier about the things I do with my character because I spent that much time creating it. With 5th, it was a very short process. It's Barbarian. I have Rage, which does this. Here's my stats. I choose 2 or 3 skills, and that's it. And it's very easy to learn and be familiar with, but there are definitely times that it feels very one note, which is, yes, it's both can be boring, but also a benefit of a Barbarian. And so it's kind of both my favorite and least favorite thing is just how much is involved with my character.
All right, Mike, hit it.
We're going to do a whole podcast episode on the behind the screens, the DMing of 5th edition. So not to go too much into that, but definitely my favorite thing would be the ease of getting into the system. Mm-hmm. That at our table, we've had 3 that have never done role-playing before, 2 that are in the party right now. Mm-hmm. And the idea that they are able to understand the rules, understand the concepts, and focus on the RP, that is a breath of fresh air.
Right.
That I don't need to spend half the session telling them what they can and can't do. They know. Mm-hmm. And that's been very nice. That's been great to see our players be able to grow so quickly. What I don't like is how explosive characters are, in the sense that with only a few levels into a class, you gain so much power so quickly.
All right.
And it's also on the monster side too, just how in combat in general, it's very quick. A long combat is about 4 rounds. Mm-hmm. 4 to 5 rounds is about what you're going to see, and you're just getting started in 3.5. A dragon fight in 3.5 is going to take you a good 20, 25 rounds. That's your session, yeah. But here in 5th edition,
I'd say a dragon fight lasts 10 rounds at most.
At most. And that is a very, very tough thing to balance. And we'll touch on balance, we'll touch on the CR system. That's going to be a whole podcast, the CR system.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to talk about, so our next podcast that Mike will be here, because he's going to be missing next week, we're going to talk about things like psionics, and the balance system for CR, and some other things that are notoriously bad.
Yeah, I'm gonna need some whiskey for that one.
We'll definitely make sure that you are hydrated properly.
Sure.
Well, that should wrap it up for this week. Thank you guys very much for coming and listening to us. I hope that you have enjoyed the podcast wherever you found it, be it on iTunes or YouTube or wherever we end up putting these as well. Go ahead and, when you have a chance, give us a good, solid review on iTunes. It helps people find us. It's super cool if you could do that for us. We really appreciate you guys coming and supporting us as well. If you want to help support us by making these guys going, making sure that we can do these every week so that we can give you this quality D&D style podcast, you can throw us some support at the Patreon link that will be somewhere, but it's patreon.com/arcanestatic. When you go on, you can leave us a message as, like, hey, I really liked your podcast, and we'll look at it and giggle like schoolgirls.
You can also check out axe.tax if you want to try our combat system. There's a link in there for the Discord. I'm on that all the time. Come chat with us.
Pretty good stuff. You can help support the development of that one as well. Give it a shot. See what you think.
Drago, anything you want to plug?
No, I think you got it. And I definitely recommend the Axe Tax because for whatever factor, whether you are a player or running the game yourself, I think it'll just be another tool that can help the process just go a bit smoother. And so you can just definitely benefit from taking part in that and just sharing it with others.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Right. Well,
and with that, we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah. Thank you guys for coming to the second episode of Tokyo Table Talks. We'll see you next time.
Cue the outro music.
Woo woo.